You're watching Byline Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
And we're back. Vinton Fountain, who is one of the leading financial advisors in the region, president of Fountain Financial Associates.
It's a mouthful.
Became a tongue tie. Is one of our guests, and Dr. Clay Moffitt, who is an assistant professor of finance at UNC Wilmington, is also our guest. We're talking about, of course, what I call after the fall, and where we go from here in the stock market for 2009. Clay, you teach at UNCW. Was there classroom discussion about this? Are students aware of what's going on?
Very much so. We brought out in the classroom a number of times that this was actually a historic moment in the market, and that they were, in a sense, privileged to watch it, hopefully from afar. And yeah,
did they get it?
They did.
They do.
They did. We almost every day would be talking about the market actions. At the time, actually, I was teaching a course in derivatives, and of course, there was a lot of discussion.
Explain that. Not too technically, if you can. Just a quick.
A derivative is just simply a synthetic security that derives its value from something else, from the movement in price of some other asset.
I got you. I hope the rest of you do. I'm curious how each of you, or how you processed when some of the nation's most respected public companies announced they're on the brink of collapse. And I mentioned before the break, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, became Wachovia, Goldman Sachs, the big three. How did you process that information, Vin?
Well, it was surprising. I mean, it was dramatic and in some ways unheard of, particularly with Wachovia, right here, homegrown in North Carolina. But I think when you pulled back and looked at what was happening in the markets and realized that the economic theory of creative destruction, which is that companies that are marginal won't survive, I think, and you looked at it on that level, it was less surprising.
The government changed that model, didn't they?
Yeah, I suppose so, for some, but not all.
Yeah.
But in most cases, these companies made decisions and used their equity in ways that didn't work. And in some ways, the models at which they operated are no longer needed. And so
You mean the business philosophy?
The business philosophy. I'm banking, for example. I think once the problems were sort of uncovered, the need for as many banks as we have is diminished. Same thing in the securities field with Bear Stearns and others, Merrill Lynch. The demand for that level of service is not as great as it was, particularly in a shrinking economy.
What about all the criticism about what some would say are the obscene compensation packages that the CEOs of these companies are getting?
To me, if you really want to look at any area that's in need of increased regulation, it would be the responsibilities of the board of directors. They're the ones ultimately responsible for looking out the interest of the shareholders. And I think it's fair to say that in many cases they've been more interested in being good friends with the executives. I forget the gentleman's name, but CEO of Home Depot had a $200 million bonus package if Home Depot was bought out. Well, how do you get your company bought out? You make the stock attractive. In other words, low. So you drive the company down, he gets $200 million bonus, walks away.
We're talking about public companies whose leadership, in the companies we were talking about, their leadership failed, ultimately, getting paid exorbitant salaries at the expense of the investors, and then on top of that, they get taxpayers' money to bail them out.
Yeah.
Comments?
Well, I mean, I'm distressed by that because I think it's wrong, and I think the culture and the ethics need to change so that is righted. And I think that's one of the things that will come out of this process that we're in, is there will be some good that comes out of it. I'm hopeful that the ethics around that issue of executive compensation will be one of the outcomes.
Should bailout money be given to companies that offer these unreasonable, quote unquote, compensation packages, Clay?
You know, you have to define reasonable. But
well, we know what unreasonable is.
we
I don't
know,
know, I might not
unreasonable
know
is a
what
lot easier to
right.
define. I'm not so confident that the bailout is going to work. Obviously, it will keep some companies alive, but for example, in GM's case, GM has huge unfunded pension liabilities. It costs them twice the labor cost to build each car, and they're bleeding cash, losing market share. They need to go bankrupt in order, some people, politicians will say, well, we can't end automobile manufacturing in America. GM won't quit any more than Delta quit flying when it went bankrupt. But it will give GM the flexibility to get out of some of these horrible, horrible contracts that are holding them hostage and prevent them from being profitable.
There's a perception that Wall Street and the government are a bit too cozy. You think do you buy that?
Not necessarily. It may be true, but not necessarily. Regarding the bailouts, I think that was a situation where it was not really a choice. I personally would prefer that bailouts never happen. But unfortunately, in this situation, the financial system is much like the blood is to the human body. Without it, the consumer and Main Street would be far worse than they are today, particularly in the short term. So I think that has the perception of too cozy, and it may exist, but from my framework, the decision to bail out was really a mandatory decision, something that had to happen.
How about in general, the government and Wall Street, Clay, are they a bit too cozy?
Who was the president said that the business of government is business? I mean, the government has the responsibility to provide a fair and equitable market so that individuals can prosper. That was kind of the whole deal behind the free markets and capitalist system.
I don't remember the Constitution putting that business as one of the functions
no,
of government.
but property rights, the Founding Fathers were very clear on property rights and government staying out of individuals' lives. Now, obviously, we have moved greatly from that perspective, where government is now almost intimately involved in a number of lives. But prosperity is big, to individuals.
Everyone, sure. We're going to take a break again. When we come back, we're going to talk about Bernard Madoff. We're going to talk about Enron. We're going to talk about WorldCom, Tyco. Stay with us.